In the spring of 1956, in a quiet coastal town in southern Japan, something deeply unsettling began to happen to the stray cats. At first, they just seemed a little uncoordinated. They would stumble over their own paws or walk in tight, dizzying circles. But within a few weeks, it escalated into absolute horror. The cats began to violently convulse. They would shriek in the middle of the night, foam at the mouth, and sprint blindly into walls. The locals started calling it cat dancing disease. And then the cats began throwing themselves into the sea to drown. The townspeople were entirely creeped out, but they figured it was just some bizarre animal virus. That was until a few weeks later, when the humans started dancing too. Welcome back to Dark History, where we pull back the veil on the cases the world tried to forget. Invite the like button over for a movie night, but only play the static between channels for 3 hours. Now let's get into today's story. Minamata was a picture-perfect company town. Most of the residents made their living in one of two ways. They either fished in the bountiful, crystal-clear waters of the Shiranui Sea, or they worked for the Chisso Corporation. Chisso was a massive chemical factory that practically owned the town, pumping out fertilizer and plastics. They provided the jobs, built the hospital, and drove the local economy. They were the lifeblood of Minamata. On April 21st, 1956, a mother carried her 5-year-old daughter into the pediatrics ward of the Chisso factory hospital. The little girl was terrified and confused. Over the past few days, she had suddenly lost the ability to walk. Her speech had slurred into unrecognizable gibberish, and her hands shook violently. The doctors examined her, completely baffled. 2 days later, her younger sister was brought in with the exact same terrifying symptoms. The doctors began going door to door in the girls' neighborhood, a small fishing enclave. What they found chilled them to the bone. They discovered 8 more people suffering from the same bizarre affliction. Some were bedridden, suffering from uncontrollable tremors. Others had lost their vision and hearing. A few had slipped into comas. On May 1st, the hospital director officially reported the discovery of an epidemic of an unknown disease of the central nervous system. Panic swept through the town. They thought it was highly contagious. People isolated themselves, afraid to breathe the same air as the afflicted. But this wasn't a virus. And the truth was hiding in plain sight. As researchers desperately tried to find a cure, they started looking at the environment around them. It wasn't just the cats. Crows were falling dead from the sky, mid-flight. Fishermen were finding thousands of dead fish floating belly up in Minamata Bay. Seaweed wasn't growing. They realized the disease wasn't airborne, it was in the food. Specifically, the fish. But what was in the fish that was destroying people's brains? This is where the story shifts from a medical mystery to a chilling corporate nightmare. For decades, the Chisso Corporation had been dumping its chemical wastewater directly into Minamata Bay. One of the byproducts of their plastic manufacturing was a heavy metal, mercury. Now, inorganic mercury is dangerous, but the ocean is huge. Chisso executives argued that it would just dilute and be harmless, but they didn't understand or didn't care about the biology of the bay. Bacteria in the muddy bottom of the bay were eating this industrial waste and transforming it into methylmercury, one of the most potent destructive neurotoxins known to science. Methylmercury doesn't just pass through your system. It bioaccumulates. Plankton absorbed it. Small fish ate the plankton. Large fish ate the small fish, concentrating the poison. And the fishermen of Minamata, who ate fish 3 times a day, were ingesting massive, lethal doses. When methylmercury enters the human body, it crosses the blood-brain barrier like a ghost walking through a wall. It literally eats away at the brain's cortex. It destroys the visual fields, the motor control centers, the auditory nerves. It traps you inside your own deteriorating body. By the time the town figured out that the factory was poisoning them, the Chisso Corporation was already a step ahead, and their response was pure evil. Instead of stopping the dumping, Chisso went into full denial. They bought off researchers to publish fake studies, blaming the disease on explosives, or spoiled fish, or natural red tides. But behind closed doors, Chisso's own hospital director, a man named Dr. Hajime Hosokawa, decided to run a secret experiment. Dr. Hosokawa took wastewater directly from the factory and fed it to healthy cats. In October 1959, one of his test subjects, known in the records as Cat 400, began to exhibit the exact symptoms of Minamata disease. The cat convulsed, spun in circles, and died. Dr. Hosokawa had the undeniable proof. He took it straight to the executives at Chisso. Their response? They ordered him to halt his experiments immediately, hide the results, and never speak of Cat 400 to anyone. And Chisso kept pouring the poison into the bay. The suffering of the townspeople became unimaginable. Pregnant women who seemed perfectly healthy were giving birth to babies with severe, catastrophic brain damage. The placenta meant to protect the child had actually acted like a sponge, drawing the methylmercury out of the mother and concentrating it into the unborn baby. The corporation tried to pay off the victims with sympathy money, tiny sums handed over on the condition that the victims sign contracts promising never to sue, even if the factory was later proven guilty. It took over a decade of protests, agonizing deaths, and a rogue doctor finally leaking the secret of Cat 400 on his deathbed for the truth to fully break open. It wasn't until 1968, 12 years after those 2 little girls were brought to the hospital, that the Japanese government finally issued a decree officially recognizing that Chisso's wastewater was the cause of Minamata disease. 12 years of unchecked dumping. Thousands of people died. Over 10,000 people were officially recognized as victims, living the rest of their lives with debilitating neurological damage. The bay had to be dredged, and massive nets were installed to trap and kill the poisoned fish to stop them from being eaten. Minamata disease isn't just a medical footnote. It is a terrifying testament to what happens when corporate greed is allowed to operate in the dark, and a reminder that the environment we destroy will eventually find its way into our own bodies. Thank you for watching. The tragedy of Minamata is hard to digest, but it's a story that absolutely needs to be remembered. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. We explore the darkest corners of history and mystery every week.